Ladies and gentlemen, on stage in front of you, a familiar sight, the McLaren Senna, the ultimate expression of a track-focused yet road-legal McLaren supercar. And now, for the first time, please welcome our next-generation supercar for the road and track, the McLaren Prost. Right, could have guessed that was going to happen.
Hello there, welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed. He's Zog.
Hello.
He's Richard.
Hello.
And we love Formula One.
Yay!
Well, you see, there's the thing, there was no shout from my right-hand side.
I didn't know this was an audience participation.
Well, it's an interactive podcast, isn't it? Yeah. Did you cheer at home, listener? Do you still love Formula One, Richard?
Yeah, I just haven't been watching a lot of it.
That sounds like a slightly qualified, a bit cautious.
I can't explain why I'm not digging this season, because it's a reasonably good season.
It's a very good season.
In as much as there's a bit of competition, you couldn't call it. I have either been paying no attention to the races live, and it's partly just because I've been out and about, with my children and stuff, and we've always seemed to have things on. This coming weekend there's a race on. I'm going to be up a mountain in the Lake District, and on balance I'd probably rather do that. The weather's meant to be quite nice, it's going to be lovely at the top there, and it's that or watch the Russian Grand Prix. So I'll do the
But did you watch
walking.
Singapore? Did you watch Singapore?
I did.
Did you watch qualifying?
I did not. I was out. I'd taken my boy to something because he was doing an activity and I wasn't required to sort of be paying full attention, so I was kind of keeping an eye on qualifying on my phone. But when the race came around, we went round to someone's house for a gathering. And we got there, and I'd forgotten that the guy whose house it was is actually a massive F1 fan. I knew he was into it, but when we arrived, and it's on the telly with the sound off, I was like, oh, well, this just got a bit better.
Unexpected treat.
So it's fine. So you could kind of socialise and all our children playing together, but at the same time go, oh, but actually then it was a bit embarrassing because with no commentary particularly, it looked like a pretty turgid race. And there's all these people kind of going, so what's going on then? I'm like, oh, nothing much. And it just confirms casual observers' suspicions about F1 that it's not very interesting.
I put it to you, Richard Porter, that you have overcome your addiction. Because I think it is an addiction, because it's exactly the same. You've only got to watch one race, even if it's a disappointing one, to start thinking, well, my next trip is going to be great, man. That the next race is going to be better. Yeah. And the fact that you've managed to disengage enough to organise things to do on Sunday when there's a race on suggests that you've overcome your addiction.
It's less that. It's more that I have a wife and children and they have things that they do. And so my wife will say to me, next Sunday there's this going on, there's this. And if I really wanted to watch it, I'd go, there's the Grand Prix on, so I'll stay in. But I find myself thinking, and you're right, I've probably broken the addiction, because I'll find myself going, yeah, I'd probably rather go and hang out with our friends or go and do something. Yesterday, I know there wasn't a race on, but I took my boy to an open day at the London Transport Museum depot in Acton, where they keep all the things that are too big to go in the main museum.
Oh.
And it was great. And I sort of things like that. You go, well, I'd rather hang out with my son. And
you've replaced your addiction with another one. You're addicted to your family, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, maybe. But, at the same time, then, equally, because it was a blag and it sounded amazing, I went to the Belgian Grand Prix in person. So I was paying attention to that one and choosing not to spend the weekend with my family because that sounded too good to miss. And it was amazing. Yeah, but it was amazing for lots of reasons. The racing being a component of it, but also go and hang out at Spa, which is lovely. And drive some AMG Mercedes.
Oh, lovely.
But the racing does come and go, to be fair. There are races which are not so exciting.
Well, exactly. But, to extend Gareth's just say no metaphor, the Russian Grand Prix, it's very easy for me to go, I'm all right, thanks, F1. And it's fine. Because, again, I'm going away with some mates. We're going to stay in a cottage up in the
just off half a race. Go on,
exactly. See how it goes. And, I could stay in Sunday afternoon, watch it. But then I sort of feel like I'd be missing out on something that might be more fun and that I only get to do once a year. Whereas the Russian Grand Prix will, sadly, probably be on next year as well.
But you'll miss that awkward moment where Putin forces his way into the room of embarrassment and awkwardness.
Well, you see, that's the other thing. I've discovered that sometimes the highlights aren't a bad thing. I can quite happily watch the highlights. In some ways, I had a lovely one. I can't remember what the race was, which is worrying. Oh, it was Baku, and I didn't watch it go out. Again, we were doing something. We got home, and the highlights were on, and my wife said, I'll put the kids to bed, and I sat and watched the highlights and opened an adult drink, and it was just a lovely sort of end to a nice weekend, because it was like, I'm getting a sort of condensed version of the race. I don't need to watch the whole thing. It's fine. I actually already knew the result, because I'd stupidly looked it up. But that's fine. I can still enjoy watching it.
It's impossible not to find it out.
Actually, that's interesting, because I think if you have accidentally learnt the result of the race, as I've also done from time to time, just because I don't always remember that when I haven't yet seen a race, when I've recorded it and I'm planning to watch it later, I often stay in the habit of just opening up a browser and going to one of my favoured news sites, just because that's what I almost always do when I open a web browser. I just want to see, because I need to know what has happened in the world in the last 45 minutes. We all need to know. You can't go more than about that length of time without checking on the headlines. And so I just open it up, and unfortunately there'll quite often be a sports headline there that will tip me off to the
or it's on the
race.
Radio in the car.
Yeah, that's
if you
don't get to the radio quite in time, you just hear the beeps and you go for...
Yeah, it's too late. The thing is, with my new, slightly more sanguine attitude to F1, I found it doesn't matter. What was the other race where I know Hamilton won? I can't remember what
Monza.
happened. Oh, that's it, yeah, and he got it back. And I knew that, and then I watched the highlights, and actually it was fine, because I got the sense that it was an exceptional victory and some interesting things have been going on.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're going, well, I know James Bond's not going to die, but I'm still going to enjoy finding out how he doesn't die and how close he gets to dying before he doesn't die, which I know is what's going to happen ultimately. And it's the same thing. I was sort of like, well, all right, I've got an hour or so to watch these highlights. Let's see how he did it. And that's fine. I can enjoy that.
If there are no spoilers and it's not one of those boring races, I always prefer to see it as live so that it can unfold and I can actually get that suspense in real time.
Yeah, it's just the thing. I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another reason why, and it's quite lame. It's just that because I even if I recorded the whole race, by the time I sat down to watch it on a Sunday evening, it might go on too late. I'm a 10 o'clock bedtime kind of bloke at the moment. I'm just really tired.
Fair enough.
Your kids do wake up at 6, don't
kids
they?
Do, and also, it's just various reasons where I've started doing some exercise, and as it turns out, it's really bad for you because it makes you tired.
It's hard on your knees. And,
it's hard on your knees, yes.
And you get ridiculous cramp in the swimming pool. And, well, this is just my recent experience.
Yes, well, I had the full, oh no, I'm going to be sick after some intensive exercise.
You're doing it wrong.
But if you had watched that Singapore qualifying session live, I guarantee you would have found the end of that session truly thrilling. You get these moments of tremendous excitement. That's not maintained for a very long time, but as long as you've got enough moments of great drama and excitement.
Well, the thing is, if I knew the result of qualifying, I don't think I would watch the highlights. Because it's a different sort of feel, isn't it? You're not watching, let's see how he got the lead back. You're just going... I would watch it like I heard that Hamilton's qualifying lap was amazing.
It was just spectacular. And then added to that, you had the fact that all the front runners were out there, completing their final attempts at a fast qualifying lap in the last few seconds of Q3. So within just a few seconds, you had Hamilton and Vettel and Verstappen, everybody completing their laps, and Hamilton's got it, and Vettel couldn't improve, and Vettel did improve, didn't he? But Verstappen has improved, but it's all happening in those last few seconds.
Yeah,
and you've got that unbelievable lap that Hamilton put together.
I actually feel sorry for Sebastian Vettel at the moment. He must be thinking, what have I got to do to beat Hamilton
and I
in
think
the Mercedes?
It's affecting him mentally, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
He's making mistakes where Hamilton isn't. And, I think that's part because of the pressure he's feeling from Hamilton. It's interesting that he's a bit more vulnerable than Hamilton is mentally in that sense.
I read an interesting piece by one of those F1 journalists that's out there, I can't remember, Andrew Benson or someone perhaps, that said there's something else that's happened to Vettel since he went to Ferrari, and it seems to be particularly prevalent this season. He's doing something you never heard him do at Red Bull.
Speak Italian?
Yes. Wearing red, also something he didn't really do there very much. But he, driving for Ferrari, he never
didn't do that when he was there, did he?
But his company car is better. He is managing the team from the car.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He's questioning strategy, he's trying to dictate strategy, and I think this story was claiming that he didn't used to do that at Red Bull because he trusted that they got their house in order and he was willing to let them dictate things, and that Ferrari, still their weak spot, they're just not the best organised team when it comes down to things like race strategy.
Well, his hero, Vettel's great hero, is Schumacher, and of course if you're going to emulate your heroes, he's going to try and run that team in the way that Schumacher did. Schumacher did it in concert with Ross Bourne and to a lesser degree Rory Byrne, and he saw Alonso's failure at Ferrari, Vettel. You know, Alonso should... Well, we'll come to Alonso in a minute, but, you know, Alonso could and should have been a world champion at Ferrari at least on 2 occasions, but it was let down because of strategy decisions, the car not being quite as good as it should. And so Vettel's model is Schumacher. Of course, Schumacher was in some ways, well, in many ways, Vettel's boyhood hero, so he's going to go with that model. And you're right, maybe it's because he feels the need to do it, but also because he thinks that is the way to achieve it, because that's how Schumi did it.
But Schumacher surely was never driving strategy from the car. He was, like you say, he was part of this team. He was executing the strategy that Ross Brawn would come up with. And if Ross Brawn needed Schumacher to run at a certain pace for a certain number of laps in order to put them into the window to be able to execute a particular pit stop strategy that would win the race, you know, Schumacher could do that. He would deliver. It wasn't Schumacher in the cockpit thinking, right, this is how we've got to change our strategy for the race now.
That's presumably because Schumacher trusted Brawn on the pit wall, and it seems like Vettel perhaps doesn't entirely trust everyone on the pit wall at the moment if he feels the need to talk back and question. I mean, I know Hamilton's done it sometimes as well, but it seems like Vettel's doing it more than he used to. And like you were saying, Gareth, that Schumacher, he did sort of pull Ferrari together, didn't he? He pulled it around him. It orbited around him. But supposedly, you know, there's all these stories about how he used to do that, and it was things like if the factory burning the midnight oil to get the car right, he would be there. He would hang around. He would make sure he was there, showing that he was willing to stay as long as it took as well. And he would go round after a win, he'd go back to the factory and he would thank everybody, from the management to the bloke who swept the floor, you know, just to instill that feeling of we are a team and I'm right here with you. And that, psychologically, is a step back from being in the car in a race, going, guys, are you sure we need to pit stop? It's a bit too late then. What you need to do is put all that in place.
In the right place. So he's doing it figuratively, but not correctly, not focusing himself where he should do. Yeah, I would be tearing my hair out if I was Vettel, because it's a combination of two things over at Mercedes. Lewis is clearly on fire. That's veganism for you, boys and girls. I'm only kidding. And they had issues with the Mercedes car this year that stopped it from being the quickest car for a little while. And now they seem to have sorted that out. It's all about rear tyre temperatures. As far as I can tell, they've increased the size of the rim on the rear tyre, so it's a greater contact patch with the tyre, and so heat sinks away some of the overheating issues that they were having with the tyre. It's now that temperature that was skyrocketing on the rear tyres is now ebbed away, turning the rim into a heat sink. I mean, what have you got to do against people who come up with brilliantly simple solutions like that? Oh, you know, what can I do? What's the point of us racing? But there again, McLaren and Williams ask that just every session, don't they?
I read that some of the teams were copying what McLaren had done with their rear wing, interestingly enough. You would think that of all the cars you were going to take any...
well, they say everyone's got one good idea in them, don't they? So.
Well, yeah, it seems like whatever else is going on, they do seem to have come up with something good on the rear wing. Which
I wonder whether that's the thing, that if you are Mercedes, that mostly everything is working well. So when there is a very specific issue, like the tyres becoming too hot, you can focus all your attention on sorting that, whereas seemingly McLaren or Williams, it's just a constant firefight, to paraphrase 99 problems, but a rear wing ain't one. And so they've sought one thing, then they've got something else to fix, and there's just not enough people or hours in the day to mend it, whereas Mercedes can just go, okay, there's one issue that's holding us back, let's fix it.
Well, and when you've got so many different things that are not where they should be, it makes it so much harder to figure out the variables, to figure out what it is that you need to tweak to make the whole thing better. It's a much more complicated equation.
Fancy getting beaten at your home race, though, being Ferrari, and get beaten at Monza. I mean, no wonder Ferrari are arguably in a little disarray. That's got to kill you, isn't it, when you've got the quickest car, apparently?
Well, yeah, and it must be disheartening when there's been so much talk about how Ferrari have had the quicker car. And when you've had all this buzz about them being that quick, when they're not able to beat Mercedes more often, yeah, it must be pretty disheartening.
What's the latest, by the way, I don't know if you've heard, on the cooling approach to the camera on the top of the airbox on the Ferrari? You know that they were told off by Charlie Whiting for putting bags of CO2 over the camera. Oh, it is cooling it because it just so happened to obscure the view so that you can't see what they're doing in terms of settings with the steering wheel. And then they fabricated this comedic-looking Heath Robinson device, which has got pipes and things going on, which, as far as I can tell, blows cold air over the camera so it fogs up. Now,
I thought the thing plugged into the airbox and just blocked the camera, because it's basically a bit of tubing off the back of a bog, isn't it? It is very lashed up.
It is really Heath Robinson, isn't it? What's the latest on that? Charlie said it's okay. I remember when he looked at it and said, it's all right, but I haven't seen it on the car. And since then, it's now been on the car, and I don't know if they've been told not to use it. We'd have heard about it.
Surely there aren't any technical regulations about stuff that doesn't go on the car. I mean, your technical regulations cover,
Good point.
a great deal of detail about what you can and cannot do with the car.
Yeah.
But who cares what tools you're using on it or what you're covering it with on the grid. And obviously the rules about they have to use tyre warmers rather than the tyre warming ovens that F1 teams used to use. There are regulations like that, of course, and the fueling rigs. But did he really make a ruling about a thing that they just put on the...
Well, they put a bag of ice on it, didn't they? And then they were told not to do that.
Yeah,
and then I think an interim solution was they put an umbrella over it.
Yeah, I saw that.
So what is it they don't want people to see? Is it something in the cockpit or something they're doing?
It has been suggested, not by me, that there are 2 indents on the Ferrari steering wheel, which are actually menu buttons, which are not visible, and that by some combination of pressing these buttons they can engage some mode which you wouldn't find if you looked other ways, and the only way that it becomes active is by pressing this, and the whole point of obscuring this camera is that you don't see the sequence that they go through that they're activating these buttons. Apparently.
Okay, the thing that sounds slightly fishy about that, however, is that if this is about engaging a certain mode or activating a certain piece of software, seeing what sequence of button pushes you do to initiate it, doesn't help anybody unless it's a cheat code on a PlayStation. And I'm pretty sure they're not using a PlayStation controller-based steering wheel.
But these aren't using the existing buttons. These are using effectively invisible buttons.
Yeah, but my point is simply that who cares if they've got invisible buttons? It doesn't tell you anything. All it tells you is that they're doing something with software.
Well, does it not mean that the FIA could come to them and go, just do that thing we saw you do on the grid again? Right. And then they'll go, oh, wait, cheat mode? Where's this come from?
But that's another issue. Whether the thing that is being enabled in software is legal or not is another thing. And that, as I understand it, whatever they are doing with the car, and it's something to do with the hybrid part of the drivetrain, which is all of the drivetrain really, but it's something to do with the electrics of the drivetrain. They've decided that it's okay, that what they're doing is legal. So I don't see how hiding buttons helps Ferrari at all. They might as well just have big buttons on the side of the car, and Vettel could just, slap the big button with his hand and go, hey suckers, we hear, I'm turning on our magic mode now.
And also, I don't
why don't you try to figure out what we're doing?
These sort of extra hidden buttons. I mean, why not just make it some kind of complicated... I know they still want to hide this, but some kind of complicated press sequence in the existing buttons. It's like, that's how you go into cheat mode, or how you remember to sort of reboot your computer or something.
Maybe because it's something that is repeatable during the race, which will allow Vettel to engage without having to go red up, green down, blue, just a couple of these 2 buttons at the same time for 5 seconds, 1 second, whatever it is. Maybe it is something that's engaged later on in the race. They are, of course, allowed to use traction control at the start of the race now. It's a limited version of traction control. But what if you could use that in some way, for instance, during safety car restarts? And that's what it's all about. And it's only that small advantage in that moment, but they're looking to inhibit any illegal or inappropriate activity. They should be allowed to give coded messages, something like, Vettel, slap my switch up, if it's slapping things on the side.
I'm going to be so happy if this whole thing turns out to be a kind of a Gordon Murray style diversionary tactic.
Yeah,
that
it's been mooted.
That they're not doing anything clever at all.
They're just freaking people out.
They're just freaking people out, and they're just making people waste their time trying to work out what they're doing, and actually they're not doing anything at all apart from gluing a couple of buttons on the steering wheel and making people
look
figure
close
out
and you go, wait a minute, these are polo mints. What the f***? They're not buttons at all. I would love it if that was the case.
Yeah,
clearly that car is really fast, but someone's got to have the fastest car. Why not them?
Meanwhile, what are they doing elsewhere that is actually making the car go fast that we're not seeing? Who knows?
Come in.
You wanted to see me, Mr. Brown.
Hey, Lando. Call me Zach. Come in. Pie?
No thank you, Mr. Zach.
Great, more for me. So listen here, son. I just wanted to say we're all super excited that next season you're gonna be our main driver, who is in Spanish.
Thank you, Mr. Zach.
And I just wanted you to know we promoted you because we think you're a great driver. And not at all because you're too young to remember when McLaren used to be a good team.
What?
Nothing. You're gonna be great. Just keep on with your training and whatnot.
Okay, Mr. Zach.
You sure you don't want any of this pie? Of course you don't. Get out of here, you young scamp. Oh, and hey, Lando.
Yes, Mr. Zach.
Don't read any history books, okay? Super! Pie.
Sniff Petrol with Gareth Jones on speed!
It's been a while since Zog, Richard and I have shared a room together, and I say shared a living room together. It's been a while since we shared any room together. And we have a rule on Speed. When we sit down and have a glass of pop and pizza beforehand, if we start talking about anything, we have to stop. Save it. Because we don't rehearse, so I'm sure you can tell what we're talking about. And what we haven't talked about, wanted to earlier on, but you can't save it with the programme, is driver shenanigans. There's been so much going on in terms of drivers leaving, drivers moving over, drivers perhaps making bad choices, and drivers leaving Formula One, that this next 20 so minutes of the show could be very intense. Should we start with the big news?
Go on then.
Yeah? Sirotkin, is he going to be there? No. Alonso leaving Formula One. Some say Formula One has let Alonso down. I disagree. I think he let Formula One down, because if he was better, he'd still be there. Discuss.
Well, if he'd made better choices, they're all being a little bit luckier.
That's part of the game.
I don't think you can say that F1 has let him down so much as he's just been in the wrong place at the wrong time for most of his career. And it's a great shame, because I've massively warmed to Alonso in the last few years when I wasn't really his biggest fan in his early
None of us
years.
were.
I mean, his talent was undeniable, but his sheer skill and the way that he's dealt with the difficult times he's had at McLaren in particular, I think is a great credit to him, and it almost makes you forget how unpleasantly political, to put it in the kindest way, he can be.
Yes, that's the thing. I mean, he spent a bit of time whinging about the McLaren, but sometimes he's almost been quite hilariously sanguine about it, and almost seemed like he's just going, whatever, what's the worst that can happen now? And then the next race stuck it on 7th slot on the grid when it has no right to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And reminds you that he is a really, really good driver. But sometimes can be a bit of an arse, and has been in the past.
Yeah.
I think he's political, but he's political in all the wrong ways. Like, he sort of lacks the guile to make the right political decisions. He just seems to have rubbed people up the wrong way and said the wrong things at the wrong time, and that hasn't helped. It feels like, from what I've read, that he's not necessarily a great team player in a way that we were talking before about Schumacher galvanising Ferrari around him by understanding that he needs to be this sort of totem pole at the centre of the team, but he also needs to give back. He needs to show that he's part of the team and he will work alongside everyone for the greater good. And it sounds like Alonso was prone to being a little self-centred, perhaps.
Are we perhaps seeing the possibility here that Alonso is the anti-Schumacher? Schumacher would build any team. Do you think Alonso could break any team? How long was he at Renault before he won those 2 championships? Were they great? And then his 2 years there broke them. He went to Ferrari, who'd been great with Schumacher, and broke them. Went to McLaren, kind of broke them the first. Well, definitely broke them the first time.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, definitely the first
and
time.
When he came back to McLaren, did he break them again? Is actually he the anti-Schumacher?
Does he bring a curse to every team that he goes to? No, I think it's just sheer bad luck, I think. He goes to Ferrari and then they turn out to have a terrible few years. He goes to McLaren again when they endured their worst period by far in their history. Yeah, he's just made some very bad choices.
I blame him.
It doesn't help that it doesn't help, I'm sure, that he's burnt some bridges, you know. So along the way he hasn't always maybe had as many options as he otherwise would have done. But that said, if you've got that talent, you can get yourself just about any drive as long as you haven't really pissed somebody off.
Well, I think that's the problem, isn't it? That's exactly what he has.
There's surely nobody that he pissed off more than McLaren.
And they had him back.
And they had him back.
Yeah, well, again, I was talking about making bad choices. I think McLaren maybe have.
I don't know, but okay, who else in the last couple of years of McLaren's racing could anybody have done better than Alonso at
Oh no, I mean that's the thing.
Getting the best
He
out
was
of that car?
exactly the right man, I suppose, to wring out a terrible car. Imagine if they hadn't had someone of his calibre and they'd had, bless him, Stoffel Van Dorn and I don't know, you know, some sort of Nick Heidfeld or something, just someone very good, but who might get their spirit broken more easily, rather than Alonso who goes, oh, fine, I'll do what I can, and goes out there and almost sort of spitefully wrestles it on into the third qualifying session. And yeah, they would be in that sort of Williams position where they just end up bumping around at the back in a lousy car with 2, frankly, mediocre drivers. I mean, I think Van Dorn is way better than Sorokin or old Cashy boy, but a bad car can really demoralise drivers. You know, sort of think about someone like Jenson Button, who absolutely shine in a great car, but seemed like he got his spirit slightly broken when things didn't work out so well. And there's a lot of drivers like that, because, I mean, they're human.
well, Raikkonen, you know.
Well, he gets his spirits
similar,
broken,
you know.
and then he just can't concentrate.
When the glass breaks, there you go. But even as Alonso leaves the sport, you know, which is opening up one more seat, it seems that still we can't hang on to Ocon, which is a shame.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah. I think he's just going to be a Mercedes test driver next year, and Bottas might get moved back to Williams or something like that. But Bottas has been great. Lewis loves him.
I don't think there's any sign that Mercedes
want
keen
to
get rid of him.
that.
You know,
I met him at the Belgian Grand Prix.
Did you?
I met him before. That sounds terrible. That would clang. Yeah, I met Hamilton as well, but Hamilton, usual sort of politely shakes your hand, but he doesn't want to be there. Fair enough. I wouldn't want to be there on the Saturday evening after qualifying. Drizzly paddock.
Yeah,
he just wants to go. In fact, funny enough, he sort of politely smiled, shook our hands, had a picture with him as a group, and then one of the minders went, anyway, Lewis has he's got to go, and he's got a lot of strategy and stuff to go through with his engineers. And we were in the Mercedes hospitality thing in the paddock. I've been up there before and they have a roof terrace, but thankfully this year, because it was slashing it down, they've had an extension put in, kind of like a conservatory extension upstairs. Really nice. There's a room on top now, a glass-sided room, so you can keep in the dry. And then I went back downstairs to the sort of middle floor, and I had to go and use the loo, and I saw Hamilton sitting on his own having some food, just playing with his phone. I wanted to go over and go, strategy my arse! But I thought, actually, fair play to him, because I'd much rather sit there and have my dinner and look at my phone than have to talk to strangers about and ask the same questions. But Bottas came up and he was lovely. He's sort of disarmingly sweet, where you want to sort of go, all right, mate, you okay? Don't be too sad if you don't beat Lewis this weekend. It's okay. You're doing really well. Because he's really not. He's just he's just a solid bloke. And he's also always surprisingly small. Because for some reason you think he's a big guy.
So many of them are. I mean,
they all are. Yeah, I mean, pretty much they all are. There's a few.
Apart from Ocon, who is over 11 feet tall, I believe. Yeah, he's very tall. Ocon is very tall.
Even taller than Mark Webber.
6'1", Ocon, I think.
Is he?
I think so, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big issue if you're a racing driver.
I was going to say, there's no way I'd fit in a racing car.
I didn't know he was that tall.
It's also because I'm getting fat, but I just wouldn't mansell.
But basically, it's the only thing that's holding you back from F1.
It's the sheer height and lack of talent.
If you could just lose a couple of inches, you'd be bigger.
Yeah. Well, as you get older, you start to shrink, don't you? So, by the time I'm in my 60s, I'm quite confident I'll get the call from Williams, because I'll be desperate by then.
So we've got Alonso leaving the sport. He's had a test with the Andretti-run team, but other teams have got massive names, haven't they? It's Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, everyone else racing.
On my house,
actually. They did. I like the way that IndyCar teams are all basically merging into one now. There's like they've got 10 names.
Is this like that always happens with like those management consultants?
Yes.
And they sort of become like Cooper's, Librand and Wilson or
and
something.
Hitler.
And then eventually there's so many names, I just go, this is ridiculous. It takes half an hour for the people answering the phones to say our name. Let's just make up a word.
Yeah,
yes, exactly. Yes. And that's what will happen.
Equivate.
You just go to IndyCar team. Yes, we're called Quarrelax now. What?
Quarrelax.
It's almost Latin.
It's made up. It's copyrightable, yeah, because it sounds really old and erudite. But
Let's just copyright that out. Quarrelax. Copyright Richard Porter. Quarrelax.
It's not spelt the way you think.
Of course it is.
There's no U after the Q for some reason.
Yeah. When you buy the trademark, he'll tell you how it's spelled.
Very good. Where were we? He's been racing for Quarrelax, I think they're called, or they're going to be called
they will
soon.
Be next year, Insignia racing.
I say racing. He had 8 tests. Nothing's been announced. Why is all that about? Why he doesn't want to sign for the first team? Or is it because part of his sweetener deal, Alonso, we've got to let you go, say you're retiring, and we will pay for half a season in IndyCar, and McLaren will run that because we quite like to do that. Do you see what I'm getting at here? That maybe he hasn't jumped, that maybe it's a sweetener because McLaren couldn't afford Alonso at the moment. They've got nothing written on the car.
They can be total dicks about it though. We'll pay for half of an IndyCar season, but it's the second half.
But the thing is, does he want to do... But does
even if you got the money together, you couldn't do it.
But does he want to actually do the season? I mean, does he actually want to do a full season rather than just do the Indy 500?
Well, he's sort of... Yeah, I suppose it's unfinished business, isn't it?
I think he thinks he can't win the Indy 500 without knowing IndyCar better, which means running a full season. I think. I'd like to see him win in IndyCar, you know?
Yeah, sure.
Can't be that difficult. It's naughty, I know. Yeah, I mean, if he wants a really level playing field, go and race in GP2. Try and beat... Oh, some great guys.
GP2 engine. Yeah. Yes, we know, Fernando. It's GP2.
Sorry, it's called F2
Formula
now,
2 now, isn't it? I know, I forgot that.
Yeah, me too. Honestly, I love F2 at the moment. It's brilliantly entertaining. George Russell's very good. Lando, I'm probably a murderer. Norris. Have you seen his eyes? He's a murderer, isn't he? Can we say that, Lando Norris? Look at his eyes. He's a murderer. Look at those eyes.
I would probably...
Does probably make it not libel?
Yeah, I think you need to ring Rahal Andretti and... or whoever your solicitor is, and just check that that's not massively libelous.
I'm absolutely certain he could be a murderer. Yeah, does that make it legally?
That he looks like.
That he looks like someone I knew once who was a murderer.
Right.
Yeah. It's the eyes. No, Lando Norris is great. What's the name of the... Markelov. Artem Markelov is tremendous in F2. There are about 5 brilliant drivers in F2 at the moment. Fuoco as well. It's proper entertaining. Yes, I felt I had to say that.
Didn't they do good. Rock Me Amadeus?
Former 1980 now driving in F2.
I can't. I was watching the F2 actually when I was in Belgium, and it is very good. It's good racing, and it's exciting. But that Marklev, I always get him mixed up with Maglev, that way of making trains float. So it's just, I can't, your brain associates two things, and you can't. Yeah. And I just want to call him Maglev.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it's a pretty good race. I mean, has there ever been in recent times an example of a driver sort of, I mean, I don't want to say going backwards, because I mean it's all sort of fairly intense and good racing, but going from Formula One into what would be perceived as a lower
feeder formula,
rather than sort of sideways into endurance racing or
well, that's a good question.
It has happened, not for a while though. Who was it who rebooted Timo Glock? Gosh, I was considering this myself recently.
Wasn't there? But that was a period when Timo Glock was trying to do all of the driving all of the time, wasn't there? So
he's trying to do everything. He was
probably still in F1 as well, like, what's his face?
Kubica when he was...
Well, yeah, he was doing Fellermeflap, who was doing Le Mans and also...
Hulkenberg.
He was doing all the driving all the time. I mean, that was just...
actually, there is a driver in F2 at the moment, if I remember, who was a... Marussia driver recently, or Marussia.
Yeah, that doesn't really count. I'm talking about someone who's made it stick.
True enough.
Yeah. Who drove for Marussia at the end?
I'm trying to remember. Can see him. Boy band, Will Stevens.
Oh, yes, of
Yeah.
course.
Now, Will Stevens has gone to WEC, but he's not the guy who's in F2 at the moment. He was a man and driver. It is the other guy called...
Yeah.
Hey, it
Russian
doesn't
guy,
matter. You
yeah.
guys can research it and find out.
Russian guy
do your
who
own research.
wasn't Kvyat.
Yeah.
The other Russian. There was a P in it.
Yeah,
You're thinking of Petrov.
Vitaly
Vitaly
Petrov. That's
Petrov.
what I was thinking of.
Vitaly
Forgotten
Petrov.
about him as well. He's still around, isn't he? Well, not doing
He's
F1,
somewhere.
obviously.
Yeah.
He's Petrov's. It was at Le Mans last year, I believe. Petrov, I think so. But
Yes,
also,
that's right. Yep.
bizarrely close to some of the names of the Vostok or Voskod or early Soyuz pilots of the Soviet space program. Vitaly Petrov. I remember he was on Soyuz 11. That name just evokes cosmonaut to me, not racing driver. Sorry, it's just. That's my problem, not yours. Roberto Merri, that's the name of the ex-Manor driver who's in F2 at the moment. So there we go. We've got Alonso, good riddance from Formula One, controversial, and
the other big move, Ricciardo. I mean, that's the.
Oh, there is.
Yes.
That's.
Yes.
Is that a surprise?
Well, in Aussie parlance, I feel like as it stands, he may be bringing himself fewer no worries. There may be more worries next season
Right,
than there are at the
okay,
moment.
yes.
Relatively, he has
okay.
little to no worries at the moment.
He's increasing the potential.
Yes. The worry
for worrying.
rate will be higher, which for an Australian obviously is a suboptimal situation.
You're sounding
agree.
like Ron Dennis you are over there.
But yeah, again, interesting to see. It's a team that, they've always sort of said, we're learning, we're building, we're blah, 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 whatever they've said about getting better. But seems like it's been mixed progress. Is Ricciardo the man to galvanise them back into a World Championship winning team, which, let's not forget, they once were?
Yeah, and if they're being as ambitious as they should be, they want to get a driver like Ricciardo. Presumably, whatever pitch they laid out to him made him think that they're a team worth jumping ship for. You kind of feel that, maybe there's an aspect of him feeling perhaps just slightly underappreciated at Red Bull, maybe.
Yeah.
And he sees perhaps a bit more of the team's hopes being focused on Verstappen rather than him. And so going to a new team where he's unquestionably number one and the focus of the team is going to be good for him. He's going to be happier as a driver. I'm sceptical that Renault are really going to be a better package than Red Bull Honda, but we'll see.
The belief is that the Honda engine department are genuinely making progress at the moment, and that the Honda engine already outperforms the Renault engine that's in existence at the moment.
I mean, that kind of doesn't surprise me in the sense that that's what we expected Honda to do, really, when they started this. It may have taken them a bit longer to get there than we thought, but I think we always expected them to produce a cracking engine.
I think generally it takes you twice as long to get there. Whatever you say it is, it's going to be twice as long. Renault are saying, well, we think 5 years, so it's going to be 10.
By which time the regulations will have changed.
Yeah, moving target. Yeah. Other driver moves. Kimi, thank you. Can we just bow for a moment, all of us? Get down.
It's audio, you find it.
Oh, sorry, I didn't actually have to bend, but I did. Be grateful that we haven't lost Kimi, because we very nearly lost Kimi from F1. At least he's parachuting out of Formula One via the gift of Sauber. We've got Charlie Clark in the Ferrari. He's fabulous. I love him. But I love Kimi more. I love Kimi.
As long as Kimi's in the sport, you'll get press conferences where Kimi turns up and answers some questions in the briefest and most disinterested manner possible. Yeah. And that's great. That's priceless.
I would like him, though, to... And I know he still can pull his finger out, but I'd really like to pull his finger out because... I don't know how long he's going to be there at Sauber. Just next year, or will he cling on in there?
2-year deal, I think.
Is it? Okay, so I don't know. It would be great if he went out in a blaze of glory. I know that car, we just don't know. I mean, I'd like Sauber to get back to being the best of the midfield. You remember they always used to be the sort of the team that could just sort of
the little team
right at the end of the season usually
nip at the heels of the big lads from the midfield. You'd always just go, considering they're sort of not the richest team, they're based in Switzerland, which sort of feels like it puts them on the fringes somehow. It's like they can't just cherry pick someone from a team that's 2 miles up the road. I guess Ferrari have the same problem, but they just feel like outsiders, and yet sometimes they'd go, look, we've accidentally come fourth again.
Yeah, I mean,
and you go, well fun.
They sort of have this modestly impressive racing history. You know,
modestly is a good way of describing it, because they seemed like a very unshowy team, just quietly got their heads down.
Yeah,
and they sort of feel like they lost it. It started when they painted their car like a sort of mediocre GP3 car.
Yes.
And I think that was the beginning of their dark period, which is still kind of going on. But I would like Raikkonen to come in there and, again, for the car to be sort of good midfield, the solidest of the midfield players, and then for Raikkonen sometimes just haul it onto the podium by sheer dint of his talent, because that's as much what Raikkonen should be about. I know he's hilarious and he does funny interviews and stuff, and he's sort of taciturn and all that stuff, but he can get away with a lot of that because you know that he's a good driver.
Yeah.
And if he's not showing us that, then it's sort of not quite as fun.
I think we are...
Sorry, that was a bit serious, but I mean...
unusual.
I would expect, I would certainly hope that there'll be particular races where Raikkonen will probably give Sauber a really great weekend. He's still fast, but he is not terribly consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And
he can be fast.
He can be tremendously fast. But the car has to be right, and he has to be mentally right. And often the mental thing seems to follow the car. You know, if he's got a good car under him, he gets this sense of, right, I can do this, and he can still be blisteringly fast. But if the car isn't so great, it seems like he doesn't see the point, and he just doesn't have that last bit of speed, and it'll be a really so-so, very forgettable weekend. So I think there are going to be those weekends when it really comes together with him and Sauber, and it'll give them a great race. I certainly hope so.
What a shame that Red Bull didn't pick Raikkonen up to go and drive for them.
No, I think they need to.
I think at this
keep
point,
a churn of new talent going.
Yeah, they have to.
They can't bring back an old horse. I don't think that's sort of their thing. By the way, I know we sort of always make great joke out, Raikkonen likes a drink. I've certainly milked that particular meme for all it's worth. I met someone recently...
which is remarkable, given how very hard he has made it for anybody to believe that he has ever touched a drink. I mean, can I just say, Richard, you've done extraordinarily well to mine such very thin material.
Well, but
all credit to you for
here's some insider gossip that I got from someone when I was at the Belgian Grand Prix. I might have mentioned I went to the Belgian Grand Prix. But I went to the Belgian Grand Prix. Yeah, I was talking to someone and I made some reference to that. And they went, I can't remember how they claim to know this, but they said, he's not like this sort of Herculean drinker that you might like to imagine. Because no F1 driver is, because they're all
very, very healthy.
They're all very fit and very, very healthy. And they said, if you gave him a beer and he drank it too fast, he'd be all giggly and falling over. And I was like, no, surely. They went, yeah, they all would. They're all terrible drinkers because they don't drink a lot because they can't. And they're super fitness guys and they watch what goes in their body. So when you suddenly put some booze into it again, they all sort of start talking loudly after half a pint. If you gave them 2 pints, that's it. They'd probably go home early.
They'd be like you throwing up.
Yeah, they'd be like me doing exercise. Yeah. There's just some things you're not compatible with.
I can kind of believe that.
Yeah. Sort of shattered my illusions. I hope it's not true. But yeah, I always imagine the myths of Raikkonen sculling a bottle of vodka. Not before a race, obviously.
It was probably just 2 or 3 shots and he's...
Yeah, or it's water in there just to maintain his image.
In the remaining moments of this show, let's quickly look at the other driver movements. We've got...
There's this. Again, it's audio, isn't it?
You can't see that. Richard was pretending he was turning a steering wheel. We've got Carlos Sainz Sr. Jr., which I believe is his correct name, is now at McLaren. That's going to go well, isn't it? It's going to go all right. It's not going to go great.
It's a great chance for him. Let's see what he does with it. You know, this little show us just how good a driver he is.
Yeah, Van Dorn is out at McLaren as well.
And he's replaced by Lando, definitely not a murderer, Norris. Not a murderer.
Yes. Yeah. And what else has changed?
Leclerc's going to Ferrari.
Gasly going to Red Bull instead of Ricciardo. And then the other...
Stroll to Force India.
We think, it will happen. And we don't know who'll be in Williams next year. Hopefully, could be possibly an outside Ocon.
Guys, I completely forgot to tell you earlier on. I went to the Belgian Grand Prix.
Oh, you should have mentioned it.
And
tell us a little about it.
I didn't break in. I was invited into the Force India hospitality thing on Saturday afternoon, and I walked in there with a couple of other mates, and we went, bloody hell, they've rebranded. That was the weekend, they suddenly changed the name of the team. Yeah. And we're looking around going,
are we in the right place?
Because it's all pink still, because they've got a water sponsor and stuff. But we were like, there's all mention of Force India. Like, you could sort of practically see where they'd scraped the name off the side of the trucks. But we went inside and went, they've done a really quick rebrand in here, because you can't see the name Force India anywhere. We're like, how have they done this so quickly? And then we realised that all the people who work for the team were wearing polo shirts with all the sponsorship on, and they'd just got black gaffer tape over the Force India name on their shirts. Yeah, so it wasn't quite as slick as we first thought.
Just goes to show that yet another problem that can be fixed with gaffer tape.
Exactly.
Yeah. Gaffer tape, as we know, is like the Force in Star Wars. It has a
dark side,
light side, and it holds the universe together. And as a roadie, I can verify that. You've been listening to Gareth Jones on Speed. One final question before we go. You're going to watch the Russian Grand Prix this weekend, Zug?
What time is it on?
2 o'clock, 5 past 2.
Yes, usual time, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, I will be watching the Russian Grand Prix.
Richard, are you...
Nope, I'll be up a mountain in the Lake District.
I'll be watching. See you for the next On Speed, which will be episode 350. Have we got anything special lined up for it?
No.
Not yet.
No, we haven't, no. See ya.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site, follow us on Twitter, or to find out about sponsorship opportunities, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.
Gareth Jones on Speed! Speed! Speed!